Fever point of view, they did lose 2 players, Chloe Bibby and Christy Wallace. Wallace didn't play at all for them last year. Bibby was picked up in the middle of the year, hurt at the end of the year, had the possibility to be a stretch 4, but no longer. The next question for the Fever then becomes Sophie Cunningham, because we were wondering who they would actually protect in the expansion draft. Because Michaela Timpson wasn't selected, I'm going to guess she was protected. So they took the risk, and this is me speculating, of leaving.
The Indiana Fever just lost 2 players in the expansion draft, and the internet barely blinked because honestly, Christy Wallace and Chloe Bibby were not the names anyone was watching. The name everyone is actually watching is still unsigned, still undecided, and still the biggest looming question mark hanging over Indiana's entire offseason. And the clock on that answer is ticking. Do you think the Indiana Fever will bring Sophie Cunningham back for the 2026 season, or does the money situation force them to let her walk? Drop your prediction in the comments. Let's start by being honest about what the Fever actually lost in the expansion draft before moving to the conversation that actually matters.
Christy Wallace with a Caitlin Clark comment. If you recall, Wallace started for a bunch of Caitlin Clark's rookie year, and I was one of the people like, get her out of the starting lineup, get her out of the starting lineup. So hopefully she can, continue to grow in her career and played overseas and all that, but obviously didn't contribute at all last year and had a rough year.
Christy Wallace did not play a single minute for Indiana last season 0. She was on the roster in a limited capacity during Caitlin Clark's first professional season, started some games during that stretch, and was one of the names that had fans practically begging the coaching staff to make lineup changes. Wallace grew as a player through that experience, played overseas, and presumably continues to develop somewhere, but losing her in the expansion draft is not a blow. It is a transaction that happened on paper, with essentially no practical impact on what Indiana does in 2026.
Who showed some flashes with the Fever, again, because she could shoot the rock, and they don't have that prototypical stretch 4, so that's a position they could still fill. I think when you get into free agency, you're looking at that position and backup point guard.
Chloe Bibby is a more interesting case, and the loss is slightly more meaningful, even if it is not devastating. Bibby showed flashes. She can shoot the basketball, and Indiana does not have an obvious prototypical stretch 4 on the roster right now. She got picked up mid-season, showed some ability when available, and then got hurt toward the end of the year. Her minutes were never significant enough to build around her, and there were defensive questions that limited her ceiling in the rotation. But the shooting ability she demonstrated, the willingness to stand in the corner and knock down an open 3 is a specific skill that the Fever need on the floor around Caitlin Clark. So losing Bibby is not a crisis, but it does highlight a position Indiana still needs to address in free agency. The stretch 4 roll a big who can space the floor, keep the lane open for Clark to operate, and provide enough defensive credibility to not be a liability is a real need. The expansion draft just made it slightly more urgent.
The Red Bomber, Chloe Bibby, who we all became a fan of. We thought she fit in really well with the way Caitlin Clark plays, being that pick and pop 4, that 4 that could be a corner spot up shooter, could really space the floor. She dealt with injuries, as everyone pretty much did on this Indiana Fever team last season, that was completely riddled and destroyed.
Or neither of these departures should generate the kind of reaction that involves the words disaster or crisis. Indiana knew going into the expansion draft that some players would be selected. The choices they made about who to protect tell you more about the organization's priorities than the actual losses do.
The Indiana Fever and the Indiana Fever fan base. The fact that we made it through the expansion draft and we only lost Christy Wallace, who wasn't even on the team last year, and Chloe Bibby, which, I mean, I like Chloe Bibby. She knocked down 3, she played defense, but if we got to keep the potential championship core intact, that's...
Here is what we know, or can reasonably infer about the protection decisions. Michaela Timpson was not selected by either the Portland Fire or the Toronto Tempo. Given that Timpson is a young player on a rookie deal with genuine developmental upside, the kind of player an expansion team would love to add without paying a supermax, the most logical explanation is that Indiana protected her. A player on a rookie contract who has shown enough to be worth developing is exactly the type of target expansion teams prioritize. The Fever apparently decided Timpson's potential was worth one of their 5 protected slots, which brings us to Sophie Cunningham.
Her shooting, her toughness, her personality all fit the team. Obviously, her star power has gone up being next to Caitlin Clark and playing on Indiana. So all things being close to equal, I'm assuming she's inclined to come back. She's made it very clear, in fact, that that is the case. But sometimes these things can come down to a monetary situation. And basically, what it will likely come down to is how much is left for the Fever salary cap, who else they see out on the market that could really help the team, and then how much of a raise they can give Sophie relative to what she could get offered by another team who could make a splash sign.
If Indiana protected Timpson and Kelsey Mitchell's situation is being handled separately through the core process, while Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark are both under contract, the fifth protected spot becomes an interesting calculation. Cunningham was left unprotected, but neither Portland nor Toronto selected her. The reason is mechanical. Each expansion team can only take one unrestricted free agent, and using that pick on Cunningham would mean giving her a supermax contract worth up to $1.4 million annually, while also burning the one unrestricted free agent slot available to them. That price was too high for what Cunningham provides at this stage of her career. She is valuable, but she is not supermax territory in the eyes of expansion franchises building from scratch.
I think that the Fever are looking to run it back for the most part with some small additions. So I would think that the changes would be more cosmetic than complete overhauls, but you never know. And until that is done, I think Sophie's probably the biggest looming question.
So, Cunningham survived the expansion draft not because teams did not want her, but because the financial structure may have made her too costly relative to other options. Portland used their unrestricted free agent pick on Bridget Carleton. Toronto went heavy with their selections. Cunningham is now available in free agency, and the question is what Indiana does about it. The case for bringing her back is fairly simple to make. She fits, not just on paper, but in practice. Her shooting, her physical toughness, her willingness to play through contact, her personality, and the way she integrates into the locker room culture, all of it is compatible with what Indiana is trying to build. Her star power has grown measurably from being in the Indiana orbit and playing alongside Clark. Teams around the league know who she is now, in a way they might not have before she was in this market playing this kind of role on this kind of team. She has also made it very clear publicly that she wants to come back. This is not a situation where Indiana is chasing a player who has already started making other calls. All indications point toward Cunningham's preference being Indiana, and that matters in a negotiation. Player preference is leverage, just not always the player's leverage. When a player genuinely wants to be somewhere, the team has some ability to shape the terms, because the alternative for the player is less desirable. But free agency is free agency, and desire only goes so far when the numbers start talking. The question Indiana is working through right now is about salary cap space. The Fever have Clark and Boston